The night I met Adrian Moretti, my daughter asked me if bad men could smell fear. Rain hammered against the windshield hard enough to blur the Manhattan streets into streaks of gold and red light. My hands tightened around the steering wheel while Lily slept in the back seat beneath her pink blanket, one tiny shoe half dangling off her foot. It was almost midnight. Way too late for a 5-year-old to still be awake. But single mothers didn't exactly get the luxury of perfect schedules. Especially not single mothers working double shifts at a restaurant where rich people spent more on wine than I made in 2 weeks. Mommy? Lily's sleepy voice drifted through the storm. Are we home? Almost, baby. I forced warmth into my voice even though exhaustion sat in my bones like wet cement. My waitress uniform still smelled like espresso and garlic butter, and my feet ached from 10 straight hours of smiling at people who barely looked at me when they handed over their platinum cards. The light turned red ahead. I stopped beside a black SUV so expensive it looked unreal under the rain-soaked streetlights. The windows were tinted dark enough to hide whoever sat inside. Men like that always hid behind dark glass. Power liked privacy. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Pharmacy reminder. My stomach dropped instantly. Lily's inhaler. I forgot the refill. No, 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 I whispered. Her asthma had been acting up all week because of the weather. The pharmacy inside the restaurant district would close in 15 minutes. I glanced at Lily through the rearview mirror. Her curls spilled across the car seat, cheeks flushed with sleep. I couldn't risk another attack tonight. I made a quick U-turn the second the light changed and headed back downtown through sheets of rain. The streets were nearly empty now. Just reflections and silence and the occasional blur of headlights cutting through the storm. By the time I parked behind the restaurant, thunder rattled the sky hard enough to shake the windows. Lily stayed asleep while I tucked my coat around her tiny body. 2 minutes, I whispered, brushing hair from her forehead. Mommy's coming right back. The alley beside the restaurant was darker than usual. One security light flickered overhead, buzzing softly between flashes. My sneakers splashed through puddles while I hurried toward the employee entrance. Then I heard voices. Male. Low. Controlled. Something about the tone made my steps slow automatically. Instinct. The kind every woman develops living in a city that teaches you danger before it teaches you trust. I should have kept walking. I know that now. But curiosity is a dangerous thing when your life has been small for too long. The alley opened toward the loading dock behind the building. A black SUV idled there, engine humming softly beneath the rain. Men in dark coats stood nearby, their movements calm and deliberate. One man remained slightly apart from the others. Tall. Broad shoulders beneath a charcoal coat tailored too perfectly to belong in a place like this. Even from 20 feet away, authority radiated off him like heat. Then he turned. Ice blue eyes locked onto mine through the rain. My breath caught instantly. Not because he was handsome, though he was devastatingly so. It was the stillness in him that terrified me. The kind of stillness that made everyone else move carefully around him. A man stepped toward him quickly, speaking too low for me to hear. The tall stranger never looked away from me. Not once. Thunder cracked overhead. Somewhere behind me, a bottle rolled across the pavement. I stumbled backward instinctively, my shoe slipping against wet concrete. The sound echoed louder than it should have in the silence. Every head turned toward me at once. Fear slammed into my chest so hard it hurt. I'm sorry, I blurted immediately. I didn't see anything. The men exchanged glances. Nobody moved. The tall man finally stepped forward, slow and controlled, rain sliding down the sharp lines of his face. Expensive watch. Black leather gloves. Eyes cold enough to freeze blood. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. His voice wasn't loud. That somehow made it worse. I swallowed hard and took another step back toward the parking lot where my daughter slept alone in the car. "Please," I whispered. "My little girl is waiting for me." Something changed in his expression at the word little girl. Tiny. Barely noticeable. But I saw it. Then headlights swept across the alley entrance. Another vehicle turned onto the street nearby. One of the men cursed under his breath. The stranger's eyes snapped back toward me. Sharp now. Decisive. Dangerous. "Bring her," he said coldly. My stomach dropped. "What?" He stepped closer until rainwater dripped from the edge of his coat onto my trembling hands. "Because after tonight," he said softly, "you can't leave." For one insane second, I actually thought about running. My body shifted backward automatically, pulse hammering so hard it blurred the sound of the rain around me. But then I remembered Lily asleep alone in my car less than 50 feet away, and fear rooted me to the pavement. The men in dark coats spread out silently near the alley entrance. Not aggressive. Not rushed. Professional. That somehow terrified me more. The tall stranger watched me with the kind of calm that made panic feel childish. Like he already knew exactly how this night would end. "Please," I whispered again, hating how weak my voice sounded. "I have to get back to my daughter." His jaw tightened almost invisibly at the word daughter. Then one of the men beside him leaned close and muttered something in Italian. The stranger answered without taking his eyes off me. Low. Controlled. Every syllable smooth as black ice. I should have looked away. Every instinct screamed at me to stop staring at him. But those blue eyes held me in place. Cold. Sharp. Exhausted somehow beneath all that control. Like this man had not slept peacefully in years. "Claire Bennett," he said suddenly. My stomach dropped so fast it hurt. 29 years old. Waitress at Bellucci's for 3 years. Lives in Queens. Rainwater slid down the back of my neck beneath my coat. "How do you know my name?" His expression did not change. "I know everyone connected to places I own." Own. The word landed heavily between us. Bellucci's was not just a restaurant to him. It was territory. A world I had accidentally stepped into without realizing it. "Adrian." Another man approached quickly from the SUV. Older. Gray at his temples. "We need to move." Adrian. So that was his name. Adrian glanced toward the street where headlights passed at the far end of the block. Then his eyes returned to me. Decision settled across his face like a locked door. "Where is your daughter?" he asked quietly. I hesitated. Huge mistake. The temperature in his stare dropped instantly. "In my car," I admitted. "Sleeping." Something dangerous flickered behind him then. Not anger exactly. Calculation. He looked toward the parking lot. "Bring the child," he told one of his men. Panic exploded through me. "No," I moved before thinking, stepping directly into his path. "Do not touch her." The words came out sharper than I expected. Fear usually made me smaller. But motherhood had burned something different into my bones over the years. Adrian stared down at me for a long moment while rain poured between us. I expected irritation. Threats. Instead, something almost unreadable crossed his face. Respect maybe. Tiny. Gone in a second. "Then you bring her," he said calmly. "But you are not leaving." Thunder cracked overhead hard enough to shake the alley walls. I ran toward the parking lot before anyone could stop me. My sneakers splashed through puddles while my hands shook uncontrollably digging for my keys. Lily was still asleep when I opened the back door. Her tiny fingers clutched her stuffed rabbit beneath the blanket. The sight nearly broke me. "Mommy," she mumbled sleepily as I lifted her into my arms. "What happened?" I pressed her against my chest so tightly she squirmed. Nothing, baby. Lie. Everything had happened. By the time I turned back toward the alley, Adrian stood near the SUV waiting beside the open rear door. Rain rolled down the dark lines of his coat without seeming to touch him. One hand rested against the roof of the vehicle, expensive watch gleaming beneath the streetlight. Lily peeked over my shoulder sleepily. "Who is that?" she whispered. Adrian's eyes lifted to hers. And for the first time all night, something in his expression softened. Barely. But enough for me to notice. "A bad man," I answered quietly before I could stop myself. Silence. One of the men beside him shifted awkwardly. Adrian did not react at first. Then slowly, almost thoughtfully, he looked back at me. "If I was truly a bad man, Claire," he said softly, "you would not still be standing here." Cold moved through me deeper than the rain ever could. Then he opened the SUV door wider and nodded once toward the inside. "Get in." The inside of the SUV smelled like leather, rain, and something expensive I could not name. Warm air wrapped around my frozen skin the second the door closed behind us, but my body stayed tense anyway. Lily curled against my chest half asleep while city lights slid across the tinted windows in blurred streaks of gold. Nobody spoke at first. Adrian sat across from us in silence, one hand resting against the dark wood beside him while the storm rolled outside. Up close, he looked even more dangerous. Not because of muscles or weapons or the men surrounding him. It was the control. Every movement measured. Every glance deliberate. Like he had spent years teaching himself how not to feel anything. Lily shifted sleepily in my arms. "Mommy," she whispered, rubbing her eyes. "Why are we in a stranger's car?" My throat tightened instantly. I brushed damp curls away from her forehead. "Just for a little while, baby." Adrian's eyes lifted to me at the softness in my voice. Then unexpectedly, he reached toward the compartment beside him and pulled out a small bottle of water. He handed it across the space carefully. "Not close enough to touch me." "She should drink something," he said quietly. I hesitated before taking it. His fingers never brushed mine. Somehow that restraint unsettled me more than aggression would have. Lily accepted the water with sleepy politeness. "Thank you." Adrian nodded once. That was all. The SUV moved through Manhattan smoothly, insulated from the chaos outside. Rain hammered against the windows while black cars followed behind us at a distance that felt practiced. Protected. Controlled. Trapped. I stared at Adrian across the dim interior light. "Where are you taking us?" His jaw shifted slightly before he answered. "Somewhere safe." "Safe from what?" His blue eyes met mine evenly. "The men who were supposed to never know you existed." Cold slid down my spine. I tightened my hold on Lily automatically. "I do not understand any of this." "I know." His voice softened just slightly. "That is what makes this difficult." Difficult. Like my life had become an inconvenience dropped onto his perfectly controlled world. Anger sparked through my fear for the first time all night. "You do not get to decide where I go," I snapped quietly. "I have work tomorrow. My daughter has preschool. We have a life." Adrian studied me for several long seconds while thunder rolled through the city outside. Nobody interrupted. Even the men sitting near the front stayed perfectly silent. Then Adrian leaned back slowly against the seat. "Claire," he said calmly, "if those people discover your face before I erase tonight from their reach, your schedule will become the least important thing in your life." The certainty in his tone made my stomach twist. Painfully. Not dramatic. Not threatening. Just factual. That scared me more than shouting ever could. Lily yawned softly against my shoulder. "Mommy, I am tired." Adrian's eyes flickered toward her immediately. Something unreadable moved across his face again. A crack in the ice. Tiny. Gone fast. How old is she? He asked. 5. Silence stretched for a moment. Then quietly, almost to himself, Adrian said, too young for this. My breath caught slightly. It was the first genuinely human thing I had heard from him all night. The SUV finally slowed beneath a covered entrance lined with stone columns and warm golden lights. My eyes widened despite myself. The building looked less like an apartment tower and more like a private hotel for people who had never worried about rent a single day in their lives. Men in dark suits appeared the second the vehicle stopped moving. Umbrellas opened instantly against the rain. Adrian stepped out first. The city wind caught his black coat sharply as he turned back toward us. Nobody will harm you here, he said calmly. I looked past him toward the towering glass building disappearing into the storm clouds above us. Then back to the men waiting near the doors. Security cameras. Marble. Power. Isolation. This was not safety. This was another kind of prison. Adrian seemed to read that realization on my face because his expression hardened slightly again. You can hate me later, he said quietly. Right now, I need you alive. Then his eyes dropped briefly to Lily sleeping against my shoulder before he added in a lower voice, both of you. The lobby looked like a place ordinary people were never supposed to enter. Black marble floors reflected gold chandelier light so perfectly it felt like walking across dark water. Everything smelled faintly of cedarwood and expensive perfume. Quiet. Controlled. Even the storm outside seemed softer through the towering glass walls. I adjusted Lily carefully against my shoulder while trying not to stare at the men positioned near every entrance. Security. Not guards pretending to be security. Real ones. The kind who noticed every movement without appearing to move at all. Adrian walked beside me without rushing. One hand remained tucked into the pocket of his dark coat while his attention tracked everything around us automatically. Elevators. Doorways. Reflections in the glass. I had never seen anyone so calm while carrying so much danger around them. The elevator doors opened before we reached them. Penthouse access, apparently. Of course. Lily stirred sleepily as we stepped inside. Mommy, she whispered against my neck. This place smells rich. I almost laughed from pure nerves. Even one of the men near the elevator looked like he was trying not to smile. Adrian glanced downward at Lily, and for one strange second, warmth flickered in those cold blue eyes again. Tiny. Human. It probably is, he said quietly. The elevator climbed smoothly, fast enough to make my stomach shift. Nobody spoke during the ride. I watched the city lights disappear beneath us floor by floor until Manhattan looked distant and unreal beyond the rain-streaked glass. The penthouse doors opened directly into a massive living space filled with warm lighting and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the storm. My entire apartment in Queens could have fit inside this place 3 times over. Cream-colored furniture. Dark wood. Art that probably cost more than my car. But despite the luxury, something about the room felt strangely empty. Not unlived in. Lonely. Adrian removed his coat slowly while one of the staff approached quietly. A woman in her 50s with silver threaded through dark hair and the calm expression of someone who had seen everything. Miss Bennett, she said gently. I am Sophia. Let me help with your daughter. I can carry her. The response came too fast. Protective instinct. Sophia nodded immediately without offense. Of course. Adrian watched the interaction silently from across the room. Then he loosened the cuffs of his black shirt with slow, tired movements that somehow made him seem more dangerous instead of less. Sophia will show you to a room, he said calmly. You and Lily will stay here tonight. Tonight? My voice sharpened instantly. No. We are going home. Silence settled across the penthouse. The rain tapped softly against the massive windows behind him. Adrian lifted his eyes toward mine slowly. No, he said simply. Anger flared through my fear hard enough to steady my shaking hands. You do not get to decide that. Actually, he replied quietly, I do. The calm certainty in his tone snapped something inside me. My daughter has school tomorrow. I have work. Bills. A real life outside whatever this is. I motioned around the penthouse helplessly. You cannot just lock people away because it makes your job easier. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. The only visible crack in his composure. Claire. No, my voice echoed louder than I intended across the marble and glass. Lily stirred weakly against me. I lowered my tone instantly, heart aching. Adrian noticed that too. Of course he did. He noticed everything. He stepped closer slowly, not threatening but impossible to ignore. Do you think I want this? He asked quietly. The question caught me off guard. He looked exhausted suddenly beneath all that control. Not physically. Soul deep exhausted. 3 hours ago, he continued softly, your name did not exist in my world. Now if I let you walk out that door, there is a very real chance someone else decides your daughter grows up without a mother. My breath caught painfully. He held my gaze without blinking. No cruelty. No manipulation. Just brutal honesty. I am trying to prevent that. The room fell silent except for the storm outside. Lily shifted sleepily, her tiny fingers curling against my sweater. Adrian's eyes dropped briefly to her hand before returning to mine. Something colder settled into his expression then. Decision. Final. You will stay here until I know nobody is looking for you, he said quietly. After that, he stopped himself. Like even he did not fully know what came after that. Then Sophia gently touched my arm. Come, she said softly. Your little girl needs sleep. I looked at Adrian one last time across the golden light and endless rain. He stood completely still beside the windows overlooking Manhattan like a man carrying the weight of an empire he no longer trusted himself to hold. And somehow, for the first time since entering his world, I realized something terrifying. Adrian Moretti was not afraid for himself tonight. He was afraid for us. I barely slept. Not because the bed was uncomfortable. The mattress probably cost more than 6 months of my rent and felt soft enough to disappear into. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Adrian standing in the rain behind the restaurant. Those cold blue eyes. The silence around him. The terrifying calm in his voice when he said I could not leave. Lily slept curled beside me beneath oversized cream-colored blankets, one tiny hand clutching the sleeve of my sweater like she was afraid I might disappear during the night. That nearly broke me. More than anything else. The room itself looked nothing like a prison. Warm lighting. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Fresh flowers near the sitting area. Someone had even placed children's books beside the couch sometime after we arrived. Thoughtful. Careful. Which somehow made the situation worse. Real monsters were easier to survive when they looked like monsters. Morning came gray and rainy over Manhattan. I woke to the smell of coffee drifting beneath the bedroom door and the distant sound of piano music echoing softly somewhere through the penthouse. For a second, I forgot where I was. Then the city skyline outside the glass snapped reality back into place. Lily sat up rubbing her eyes. Mommy. I am here. I kissed the top of her head quickly before she could hear the fear in my voice. Can we go home now? My throat tightened painfully. Before I could answer, a soft knock came at the door. Sophia stepped inside carrying a tray with pancakes shaped like hearts, strawberries, and hot chocolate topped with whipped cream. Lily's entire face lit up instantly. Oh my gosh. Sophia smiled warmly. Good morning, little one. I stared at the tray in confusion. You did not have to do this. Mr. Moretti requested breakfast for your daughter. Sophia set the tray gently near the bed while Lily climbed closer with wide eyes. The scary man did, she whispered. Sophia paused only briefly before smiling again. He can be difficult, she admitted carefully. But he notices things. Notices things. That was one way to describe Adrian Moretti. Lily bit into a strawberry happily while I watched the rain sliding down the giant windows. Where is he? I asked quietly. Working. Sophia adjusted the blankets near Lily automatically. He has not left his office since 4 this morning. Exhaustion flickered through me unexpectedly. Not sympathy exactly. More confusion. Men like Adrian were not supposed to lose sleep over strangers. Especially not women they practically kidnapped off the street. After Sophia left, I walked carefully through the penthouse while Lily watched cartoons beneath a blanket on the enormous couch. Every room felt perfectly designed and completely untouched at the same time. Beautiful but cold. Like nobody actually lived here emotionally. Then I noticed the piano near the windows. Dark wood polished to perfection. A thin layer of dust rested across the keys. Nobody had played it in a long time. You should not wander alone. Adrian's voice behind me nearly stopped my heart. I turned too fast. He stood near the hallway entrance wearing black dress pants and a charcoal sweater instead of the tailored suits from last night. His dark hair looked slightly damp like he had just showered, but shadows beneath his eyes made it obvious he had not slept much either. Without the suit jacket and gloves, he looked younger somehow. More human. Which was dangerous in a completely different way. You frightened me. I know. His gaze shifted toward the piano beside me. Something unreadable crossed his face before disappearing instantly. Lily is asking for you, he added quietly. I folded my arms tightly. When can we leave? Silence. Rain tapped softly against the windows while the city stretched endlessly beneath us. Adrian walked slowly toward the bar near the kitchen, pouring black coffee without looking at me. Not yet. Anger flashed hot through my chest again. You keep saying that without explaining anything. He finally lifted his eyes toward mine. Tired blue against the gray morning light. Because explaining my world to someone like you does not make it safer. Someone like me. His jaw tightened slightly. Wrong words. He knew it immediately. I did not mean, no, I cut him off quietly. I understand exactly what you meant. The room fell silent. In the distance, Lily laughed softly at something on television. The sound felt too innocent for a place like this. Adrian stared at me for several seconds before speaking again, lower this time. You are still kind enough to believe people are mostly good. His eyes drifted briefly toward the rain-soaked skyline beyond the windows. That makes you vulnerable in my world. Something about the way he said my world sent a chill through me. Not pride. Regret. Then suddenly a phone rang sharply somewhere deeper in the penthouse. Adrian answered immediately, listening in silence while his entire expression changed. The warmth disappeared first. Then the exhaustion. By the time he lowered the phone, the dangerous man from the alley had returned completely. Cold. Focused. Controlled. My stomach tightened instantly. Adrian looked directly at me. Nobody leaves this floor, he said quietly. Not even for a second. Fear crawled up my spine. What happened? His eyes darkened slightly. Someone is asking questions about a waitress from Queens and her little girl. The atmosphere inside the penthouse changed instantly after that phone call. It was subtle at first. A man speaking quietly into an earpiece near the hallway. Another checking the locks near the elevator doors. Movement without panic. Controlled. Efficient. But fear does not need loud noises to recognize itself. I felt it anyway. Adrian stood near the windows overlooking Manhattan with the phone still loose in his hand, jaw tight enough to cut glass. Rain streaked down the skyline behind him while thunder rolled low across the city. What does that mean? I asked quietly. He did not answer immediately. That silence scared me more than words could have. Finally, he slid the phone into his pocket and looked at me directly. It means someone noticed you were there last night. My stomach dropped hard. I told you I did not see anything. That does not matter. His voice remained calm, but something dangerous simmered beneath it now. People like that do not leave possibilities unfinished. I wrapped my arms around myself automatically. Across the room, Lily sat cross-legged on the enormous couch coloring in one of the books Sophia found for her earlier. Pink crayon. Tiny tongue sticking out slightly while she concentrated. Completely innocent. Completely unaware that adults had just turned her life into something frightening. Adrian followed my gaze toward her. His expression shifted again. Softer for half a second. Then gone. I need to move both of you somewhere else for a few days, he said quietly. No, the answer came immediately. You are not dragging my daughter deeper into this. His blue eyes lifted back toward mine slowly. You are already in this. Because of you. The words hit harder than I intended. Adrian absorbed them without flinching. Which somehow made me angrier. I had a normal life before last night. Normal. Something dark crossed his face then. Not mocking. Sad almost. Claire, you were working 12-hour shifts while raising a child alone and driving a car that sounds like it dies every time you brake. Heat rushed into my face instantly. You do not know anything about my life. I know enough. The room went still. His voice stayed low and controlled, but each word landed precisely. I know you skipped dinner last night because your daughter wanted the last strawberry yogurt in your refrigerator. My breath caught sharply. Adrian stepped closer slowly. I know your landlord has called twice this month asking about late rent. Another step. I know your daughter sleeps with a rescue inhaler beside her bed because she is afraid she will stop breathing while you are asleep. My chest tightened painfully. Stop. He did not. And I know, he continued more quietly now, that you have been carrying all of that alone for a very long time. Silence crashed into the room between us. I hated that he knew those things. Hated that part of me felt exposed standing there in front of him while rain hammered against the windows. Nobody had looked closely at my life in years. Not enough to notice the details. Adrian's expression hardened slightly when I looked away first. You think I took you because I wanted another complication? He asked softly. I did not. His eyes drifted briefly toward Lily again. But now that you are here, I will not let someone use your child to reach me. The word sent cold through my blood instantly. Use her. Adrian's jaw tightened. Too late. He had already said it. Fear crawled violently up my spine. Nobody is touching my daughter. My voice shook despite every effort to steady it. Adrian stared at me for a long moment before answering. Not while I am breathing. The certainty in his tone hit something deep and terrified inside me. Because for the first time since entering this nightmare, I believed him completely. A small voice suddenly interrupted the tension. Mommy? Lily stood beside the couch clutching her coloring book against her chest. Can I ask the scary man a question? I froze. Adrian blinked once like he genuinely did not know how to respond to that sentence. Lily, I warned softly. But she was already walking toward him with complete 5-year-old fearlessness. She stopped directly in front of Adrian Moretti, the man grown men lowered their eyes around, and tilted her head upward thoughtfully. Why do you look sad all the time? Silence. Absolute silence. Even the rain seemed quieter somehow. Adrian stared down at her like nobody had spoken to him that honestly in years. His entire body went still. Then Lily held out her pink crayon toward him very seriously. "You can use my color if you want." Something changed in Adrian's face right then. Tiny. Fragile. Human. He accepted the crayon carefully between his fingers like it was something breakable. Then in a voice so quiet I barely heard it, he asked, "What color is this supposed to fix?" Lily smiled softly. "The lonely parts." Adrian kept Lily's pink crayon long after she wandered back toward the couch. That should not have mattered. It was a cheap wax crayon from a dollar store coloring set with the paper peeling off the sides. But somehow seeing it between the fingers of a man like him felt stranger than the storm outside or the armed men guarding the penthouse doors. Adrian stared down at the crayon silently for several seconds before placing it carefully beside his untouched coffee cup. Not throwing it away. Not pretending the moment never happened. Carefully. Like it meant something. Lily climbed back onto the couch and continued coloring happily beneath a blanket while cartoons played softly in the background. Children adjusted to impossible situations faster than adults ever could. Maybe because they still believed people could turn out kind. I watched Adrian across the room while he spoke quietly into another phone call near the windows. Italian. Low. Controlled. Every now and then his eyes drifted back toward Lily automatically, checking where she was without seeming aware he was doing it. He has not looked at anyone like that in years. Sophia's voice startled me softly from beside the kitchen entrance. I turned toward her. She carried fresh towels folded neatly against one arm. Like what? Sophia glanced toward Adrian before lowering her voice. Carefully. Something tightened unexpectedly inside my chest. You make him sound harmless. No, she smiled faintly. I make him sound tired. Adrian ended the call and crossed the room toward us. The atmosphere shifted around him instantly. Not fear exactly. Awareness. Like the entire penthouse unconsciously adjusted to his presence. The weather is getting worse, he said calmly. We leave tonight. My stomach dropped. Leave for where? Upstate. Absolutely not. Adrian barely reacted to my anger anymore. Which somehow made it more frustrating. Claire. You do not get to move my daughter around like luggage. Lily looked up from the couch immediately at the sharpness in my voice. Guilt hit me instantly. Adrian noticed that too. Of course he did. He lowered his tone slightly. I am trying to keep her alive. The quiet certainty in his voice silenced me for half a second. Then stubborn anger rushed back stronger. You keep saying that like it explains everything. Adrian stared at me for a long moment before answering. Because everything else would frighten you more. Thunder cracked outside hard enough to rattle the windows. The lights flickered once across the penthouse. Just once. But every man near the elevator straightened instantly. Adrian's attention snapped toward the ceiling automatically. Sharp. Focused. Dangerous. Backup generators are online, one of the guards said immediately into his earpiece. Lily jumped slightly at the thunder. Before I could move, Adrian crossed the room toward her first. He crouched beside the couch slowly, large hands resting loosely against his knees so he would not seem intimidating. The sight alone nearly stopped my breathing. Men like Adrian Moretti were not supposed to kneel for anyone. Especially not little girls with strawberry stains on their pajamas. Hey. His voice softened unexpectedly. It is only thunder. Lily studied him carefully with those huge gray eyes that missed nothing. You do not like loud noises either. Adrian blinked once. Completely caught off guard. What makes you think that? Because you always look ready for bad things. Silence. Deep and strange. I watched something shift behind Adrian's eyes then. Not weakness. Memory. Pain maybe. Lily held out her coloring book toward him. You can sit here if you want. Adrian looked at the tiny space beside her on the couch like nobody had invited him anywhere in a very long time. Then slowly, almost cautiously, he sat down beside her. The expensive charcoal sweater. The storm outside. The little pink crayons scattered across his massive hands. None of it should have looked natural together. But somehow it did. Lily pointed seriously at the page. This one needs a dad. My breath caught painfully in my chest. Adrian went completely still beside her. The room itself seemed to stop breathing for one impossible second. Then Lily added softly without looking up, the mommy looks tired doing everything alone. Heat flooded into my eyes instantly before I could stop it. I turned away quickly toward the windows. Adrian said nothing for several long moments. When I finally looked back, he was staring down at the coloring page with an expression so raw and unguarded it almost frightened me more than his coldness ever had. Then quietly, so quietly I barely heard it over the rain. He asked Lily, what if the dad in the picture is not a good man? Lily frowned thoughtfully like the answer was obvious. Then he can learn. Silence swallowed the room whole. Adrian looked up slowly then. Straight at me. And for the first time since that alley behind the restaurant, he did not look like a mafia boss watching a problem. He looked like a man standing too close to something he desperately wanted but did not believe he deserved. The storm got worse after sunset. Rain slammed against the penthouse windows so hard it sounded like handfuls of gravel thrown from the sky. Manhattan disappeared beneath gray sheets of water and flashing lightning while the wind howled somewhere high above the city. The entire building seemed to hum with tension. Men moved quietly through the penthouse checking exits, speaking low into radios, watching security monitors with expressions too calm to be comforting. Adrian barely left the phone in his hand for more than a minute at a time. Every call pulled another piece of warmth out of his face until the dangerous man from the alley remained again completely cold. Controlled. Untouchable. But every now and then, his eyes still drifted toward Lily coloring beside the fireplace. Like he needed to make sure she was still there. I do not like this weather, Lily whispered softly while thunder rolled outside. I tucked another blanket around her shoulders. It is only a storm, baby. The lie sounded weak even to me. Because the storm was not the real problem anymore. Adrian crossed the room toward one of the guards near the hallway. Their conversation stayed low and fast in Italian, but I caught enough from Adrian's expression to know something had gone wrong. His shoulders stiffened. Jaw tightened. One sharp nod. Then he turned toward me immediately. We leave in 10 minutes. Fear crawled through my stomach instantly. What happened? They found the car you drove last night. My pulse stumbled hard. How? You live in a world where people post their breakfast online, Adrian said quietly while grabbing his coat from the chair beside the windows. Tracking someone is not difficult anymore. Lily looked up from the couch. Are we going on a trip? Adrian's entire expression softened for one brief impossible second. Something like that. Sophia hurried from the hallway carrying a small overnight bag already packed. For Lily. Inhaler. Pajamas. Tiny sneakers tied neatly together on top. The sight hit me harder than it should have. They had prepared for us. Planned for us. Somewhere inside all this fear and danger, Adrian had still remembered my daughter needed clean pajamas. I hated how much that mattered to me. Claire. Adrian's voice pulled me back sharply. He stood near the elevator entrance now wearing black gloves and a dark coat that made him look carved from shadow again. Stay close to me downstairs. I can protect my daughter. His eyes locked onto mine evenly. I know. The words landed strangely between us. Respect. Real respect. Then the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Every guard in the penthouse moved instantly. Hands near concealed weapons. Eyes toward the windows and doors. Adrian's head snapped toward the ceiling sharply. Generator. Still online, someone answered immediately through an earpiece. But Adrian already looked dangerous in a completely different way now. Instinctive. Predatory. He crossed the room toward us fast enough to make my pulse jump. Shoes on Lily. Now. Fear exploded through me at the tone alone. I dropped beside Lily immediately, hands shaking while helping her into tiny rain boots. Thunder cracked violently outside. Then suddenly every light in the penthouse went black. Lily gasped softly. Somewhere deeper in the building alarms started screaming. Not loud panic alarms. Controlled security alarms. Worse somehow. Adrian's hand closed carefully around my arm in the darkness. Warm. Steady. Stay behind me. The emergency lights flickered on seconds later, bathing the penthouse in dim red shadows. The entire atmosphere changed instantly. Dangerous. Unreal. I heard men speaking sharply through radios near the hallway while rain battered the glass walls around us. Service elevator breach, one voice said urgently. My blood turned to ice. Adrian pulled me closer automatically while scanning every entrance in the room. Cold blue eyes. Calculating. Deadly calm. Lily clutched my hand tightly. Mommy, it is okay, I whispered immediately even though fear made my voice tremble. Adrian looked down at Lily for half a second. Something fierce crossed his face then. Protective in a way that felt almost frightening. Then he crouched directly in front of her despite the chaos around us. Listen to me carefully. His voice lowered gently. You stay close to your mother no matter what happens. Understand? Lily nodded quickly, gray eyes wide. Adrian removed one black glove slowly and pressed something small into her hand. The pink crayon from earlier. For luck, he said quietly. My chest tightened painfully watching that. Then a loud metallic crash echoed somewhere down the hallway outside the penthouse doors. Every guard raised their heads instantly. Adrian stood smoothly in front of us without hesitation, placing himself between my daughter and whatever was coming. The red emergency lights painted hard shadows across his face while thunder shook the windows behind him. And for the first time since entering Adrian Moretti's world, I realized something terrifying. He was not preparing to save himself tonight. He was preparing to save us. The next few minutes blurred into red emergency lights, pounding rain, and the sound of my own heartbeat crashing against my ribs. Adrian stood directly in front of Lily and me while men moved fast through the penthouse speaking sharply into radios. The elegant calm from earlier had vanished completely. This was his real world now. Controlled chaos. Survival. One of the guards approached quickly from the hallway. The service entrance was compromised. We are moving now. Adrian nodded once without looking away from the doors. Then his hand found the small of my back gently but firmly. Stay with me. We moved through the private hallway fast while alarms echoed faintly through the building. Lily clung to my hand with one fist and the pink crayon with the other. Somehow she still had it. The elevators were no longer an option. Adrian led us toward a hidden stairwell behind a black paneled wall I would never have noticed on my own. 2 guards moved ahead of us. Another stayed behind. The storm outside shook the building again with violent thunder. Lily flinched hard at the sound. Adrian looked back instantly. You are doing good, Piccola. The Italian word softened something inside me despite the fear swallowing my chest. We descended flight after flight beneath flashing emergency lights while rain battered the city above us. Adrian never let go of my hand once. Not even when another phone started vibrating in his pocket. He ignored it. That frightened me more than anything else. Men like Adrian Moretti did not ignore important calls unless something more important already stood in front of them. Us. By the time we reached the underground garage, black SUVs were already waiting with engines running. Rain blew sideways through the partially open security gates. Adrian guided Lily into the back seat first before turning toward one of his men. "You drive them north." The sentence hit me instantly. Them. Adrian's eyes met mine evenly. Cold blue. Exhausted blue. "I am not coming with you." Fear crashed through me harder than before. No, the word escaped before I could stop it. Adrian looked slightly surprised. Maybe because I sounded terrified at the idea. Maybe because I was. "Claire. You said we stay together." Lightning flashed across the garage, illuminating his face for one sharp second. Rainwater darkened his coat while distant sirens echoed somewhere above the city. "If they are watching the roads, they are looking for my vehicle," he said quietly. "You have a better chance without me beside you." "Better chance?" My voice cracked. "You talk like we are already running for our lives." Adrian stepped closer then, close enough that I could see exhaustion carved beneath his control. "You are." Silence slammed between us. Lily watched from inside the SUV with wide frightened eyes while the storm screamed around us. Adrian lifted one hand slowly toward my face like he wanted to touch me, then stopped himself halfway. The restraint somehow hurt more than contact would have. "I never wanted you in this world," he said softly. "But now that you are here," he glanced briefly toward Lily inside the vehicle. Something vulnerable flickered through his expression so fast it almost disappeared before I could recognize it. "I cannot lose either of you." My chest tightened painfully. This dangerous impossible man standing beneath flashing red lights and pouring rain sounded sincere. Completely sincere. One of the guards approached urgently. "Boss." Adrian's entire face hardened again instantly. The softness vanished behind steel. He opened the SUV door for me personally. "Go." I climbed inside numbly beside Lily while rain soaked the edges of my coat. Adrian leaned down slightly toward my daughter. "You keep your mother safe for me, hmm?" Lily nodded seriously before reaching into her tiny pocket. "Wait." Adrian paused. Lily held out the pink crayon carefully toward him. "You forgot your lonely color." For one impossible second, the entire garage seemed to stop moving. Adrian stared at the crayon silently. Then slowly, with hands that suddenly looked far less dangerous than before, he accepted it. "Thank you, Piccola." Lily smiled softly. "Now you can find your way back." Adrian looked at her like nobody had ever offered him something so small and meant it so honestly. Then his eyes lifted toward mine through the storm and flashing lights. There were 1,000 things neither of us said in that moment. Fear. Gratitude. Something deeper and far more dangerous growing quietly between us. The SUV doors closed. Engines roared. As we pulled away through the rain-soaked garage, I looked back one last time through the darkened glass. Adrian stood alone beneath the emergency lights watching our vehicle disappear into the storm, one hand clenched tightly around a little pink crayon. And somewhere between terror and heartbreak, I realized the most dangerous thing about Adrian Moretti was never his power. It was the way he made me believe that even a man raised in darkness might still learn how to love.